loving emotion of father or mother. And so I struggle with talking about God as our heavenly parent. It probably makes good political sense, but it doesn't do it for me. But the idea that our Father God loves with a mother's love as well as a father's love does make some sense to me. Anyway, in this picture, the son is home in his father's embrace. And just in case you're thinking, well, why on earth would Luke want any suggestion that God might be anything other than just a father in the story? Can I remind you of what you're going to read tomorrow? Is that an odd expression? Tomorrow when we talk about the lost coin in this series of 3 parables that are linked and all have that sense of the searching father, the searching shepherd, and the searching woman looking for her coin. Do we not already in those stories have that challenge to the simple male perspective on the story? I wonder. Food for thought. Here we have the son returned to his father's embrace. And Henry Nouwen is challenged to live up to his calling to be the one who welcomes others back too. As a Catholic priest, he would have spent an awful lot of his life having people call him Father. As a Baptist minister, it happens a bit, not usually by other Baptists. We know better, don't we? But, I would do some work with the Air Training Corps Squadron, and I'm Padre there, Father by any other name. I have a beautiful but slightly damaged soul who walks past the church on a regular basis, and in a voice that would carry to the other end of the town, he shouts across, "Hello, Father!" And, bless you, Darren. It's not about what we call someone, so much as that calling. Are we prepared to enter into the story and be the ones who will welcome others back? And it's not as simple as it sounds. It's not as simple as it sounds to hear their stories and forgive. There will be times when people tell you things and you think, well, why on earth did you take half your father's property and spend it on wild living? What were you thinking? But it's not the time, and it's not the place, and it's not your calling, it's not your vocation. Your calling and your vocation in Christ is to say, welcome home. We've missed you. Let's have a party. Are we prepared to be that sort of Christian? Because this story tells us, as other parts of the scriptures tell us too, that our God is a God of boundless forgiveness. Our God is a God of amazing love. And every time we try to put up boundaries to that love or limits to that love, it's not just that we mar the image of what the Christian faith is. I think we damage the image of who our God is. If we imagine God as anything less than loving, we lose sight of the God who is revealed in the scriptures and most perfectly revealed in Jesus himself. One of the better books I read at Bible college, at Baptist college, was a book that's simply entitled The Christ-like God. It's a book of theology that basically said if you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. And that is a wonderful place to start theology, and not a bad place to end it either. What is God like? God is like Jesus. The Jesus who gets complaints for eating and drinking with all the wrong people. The Jesus who gets complaints for being too generous, too welcoming. When did you last get accused of being too generous? As a challenge. So look, let's spend some time in discussion. You've got a few questions in front of you. How does a forgiving and accepting Father relate to your understanding of God? Does that fit with the God that you've encountered and experienced in your life? And what do you feel about this idea of God being mother as well as father? What does that say about God? And then Henry's call to become the father. Do you sense a similar call? Not necessarily to the Catholic priesthood, that ship might have sailed. But do you feel that similar call? And what do you think it means? So let's take a few moments to talk together. They're about 10 minutes. Of course, Nouwen might not be right. And Rembrandt might have misunderstood. And maybe Jesus only showed us part of the picture in the story. Because we have clung to the idea of God as a God who is filled with wrath and condemnation. We have prized this idea that God is somehow angry with us, as if this is a glorious thing to believe. And it is true that the scriptures do give us a mixed message at times. I mean, I could take you to a few spots, couldn't you? I mean, do we want to talk about the Canaanite genocide? You know, Joshua goes in and they all die, and, you know. I sometimes wonder whether there are moments in the scriptures that are so dark so that the light that shines in the darkness can shine all the more clearly. Because if we will resist those temptations of what I'm going to call old-fashioned paganism, believing that what we need to do is calm down an angry God, if we can resist those notions, we can begin to encounter the God who loves us and calls us to love one another. Why do we need to become like the Father? I mean, I say this next sentence terribly carefully. Why do we need to become like God? Because God has chosen to work in this world through people like you and me. God has chosen to work in this world through the woundedness and brokenness of our lives and of our churches and of our families. I'm sure there are other ways that we could have arranged it better. God calls us, I believe, to try to follow. As Nouwen puts it almost at the end of his book, in order to become like the Father, I must be as generous as the Father is generous. Just as the Father gives his very self to his children, so I must give my very self to my sisters and brothers. Jesus makes it very clear that it is precisely this giving of self that is the mark of the true disciple. No one can have greater love than to lay down their life for their friends. This giving of self is a discipline because it is something that does not come spontaneously. As children of the darkness that rules through fear, self-interest, greed, and power, our great motivators are survival and self-preservation. But as children of the light, who know that perfect love casts out all fear, it becomes possible to give away all that we have for others. As children of the light, we prepare ourselves to become true martyrs, people who witness with their whole lives to the unlimited love of God. Giving all thus becomes gaining all. Jesus expresses this clearly as he says, "Anyone who loses their life for my sake will save it." So every time I take a step in the direction of generosity, I know that I am moving from fear to love. But these steps, certainly at first, are hard to take because there are so many emotions and feelings that hold me back from freely giving. Why should I give energy, time, money, and yes, even attention to someone who has offended me? Why should I share my life with someone who has shown no respect for it? I might be willing to forgive, but to give on top of that? Still, the truth is that in a spiritual sense, the one who has offended me belongs to my kin, my gen. The word generosity includes the term gen, which we also find in the words gender, generation, and generativity. This term from the Latin genus and the Greek genos, or genos, remembering my Greek, refers to our being of one kind. Generosity is a giving that comes from the knowledge of that intimate bond. True generosity is acting on the truth, not on the feeling, that those I am asked to forgive are kinfolk, belong to my family. And whenever I act this way, the truth will become more visible to me. Generosity creates the family it believes in. Grief, forgiveness, and generosity are then the three ways by which the image of the Father can grow in me. They are three aspects of the Father's call to be home. As the Father, I am no longer called to come home as the younger or elder son, but to be there as the one to whom the wayward children can return and be welcomed with joy. It is very hard to just be home and wait. It is a waiting in grief for those who have left, and a waiting with hope to offer forgiveness and new life to those who will return. I'm very conscious that there is something in this story and my retelling of it through Henry Nouwen's retelling of it, through Rembrandt's retelling of it. There is something in this that is extraordinarily countercultural. It's not just that we find it more comfortable to believe in judgment. It's not just that we find it more comfortable to stick with the safety of not risking being generous. I think it's countercultural because it speaks of creating a way of being Christian that says our calling is to be better Christians. I mean, that's not going to sell books. That's not going to get you an invite to the big conferences and conventions. Church growth requires dynamism, Church growth requires a new form of discipleship. It requires new patterns and models to build the church and to create new and exciting offers. Where's the mission in simply being as like Jesus as we can? Where is the mission in simply waiting like the grieving, hurt father for the sons to return? It grieves me that our churches are not full, but I'm not sure that our calling is to fill them with bright ideas and special initiatives. I think our calling is to become like the Father and to welcome others home. I noticed out in your entranceway you've got a few books, including another of my favourites, Philip Yancey's What's So Amazing About Grace. Is that well known to a few of you? Glorious book that begins with one of those moments, a story of a woman in a most dreadful situation. Really has, it's foul, it's horrid. And someone suggests to her, have you thought about going to church? And she says, why on earth would I want to go there? I already feel bad about myself as it is. Friends, that story would be hilarious if it weren't so patently true. Dare we believe that our calling is as difficult and yet as simple as this, to be the God-like Father waiting to welcome home the lost. You had time to talk together. Was there anything that came up, anything you'd like to share with the group, or anything you'd like to ask? Or are we at that stage of the day when we have just about run out of energy? You are coming back in the morning, aren't you? I've been promised breakfast, so thank you. Hi, Chris.